Now, the country's power cuts crisis reaching a tipping point, prompting this latest government's intervention. Last night, we saw the president announcing a number of measures to try and tackle this problem. The plan includes buying power from private producers and the scrapping of licensing requirements for energy or for private energy projects. The president alluded that Eskom's leadership is capable to deal with the power utilities challenges. Well, our senior reporter Aviwe Mtila has been getting reaction to the president's plans as well. He's joining me now in the studio, and I understand we have our reporter Nqobile Madlala who's out on the streets as well, gauging and speaking to the people of power cuts. Good afternoon, colleagues. Let me begin with you, Aviwe, first, before we go out onto the streets with Nqobile here in the studio. What have you heard, particularly from trade unions?
Dan, while the president says that there were wild consultations, the General Secretary of SAFTU says that they weren't consulted. Zwelinzima Mavavi says that what he calls the coalition of the excluded, which would include your AMCU and other structures that aren't necessarily associated with the tripartite alliance, weren't consulted in all these set of actions that are happening. He says that they were excluded. The second point that he mentioned, Dan, is that this is all a big ploy to spearhead and fast-track privatization from initiatives that include purchasing power from private companies such as the mines and also neighboring countries and other initiatives that were mentioned by the president. He's saying that all of those are just ploys to fast-track privatization in order to maximize profits. Let's take a listen to the General Secretary of SAFTU in an earlier conversation that we heard a bit earlier on.
This is a long-term plan that have been started by the ANC government in 1997, which reminds us of the United States scholar Noam Chomsky, who normally say your plan to privatize normally involves defunding an institution, making people very angry. And when people's anger is at top levels, as it is in South Africa today as a result of stage 6 load shedding, then you offer privatization as the only solution. Yesterday's statement was pure fastened pace towards handing over energy to the private players to maximize profits and to make money for the shareholders. And all of the steps that have been announced, at the center of that is about that.
This is Zwelinzima Mavavi of SAFTU. Now, Aviwe, I understand you also touched base with some businesses. What are the sentiments today?
I spoke to the president of the Black Management Forum, Andile Mnomlala, who welcomed what he says was a long-awaited initiative from the president. He says that they've been egging the president on from 3 months ago, saying that he should be more hands-on instead of listening to reports from people on the woes that Eskom faces. That was one point that he raised, where he went on to say that he also offered the president, saying that they should open up for the black entrepreneurs to open up 3 coal power stations that would generate at least 6,000 megawatts into the grid. One thing that he was unwavering about, Dan, was that when it came to transformation, he said while there was mention and talk of loosening up red tape, the one thing that they're willing to go to court for, even threatening court action, is if transformation is done away with as they loosen up those red tapes. Let's take a listen to Andile Mnomlala, the president of the Black Management Forum.
Any plans of anyone who thinks that transformation, employment equity must be put at bay because we have an energy crisis. Our transformation policies are not policies of convenience. We do them when we feel like. These policies are meant to drive the structural recomposition of our economy. We will not excuse even Eskom at the doldrums of ourselves dying without electricity for them to go and find white matriculants that are made to be engineers. All the people that must be brought on board at Eskom must comply with the Employment Equity Act of our country and all the other interventions, and we welcome the interventions that are talking about fast-tracking the bureaucracy that is in place, making sure that there's flexibility and adoption of procurement quicker and everything. But if you compromise black economic empowerment in that process, then you're going to meet us in court. Black people today have nothing to eat anyways.
Thank you very much, Aviwe, Mtila. But now to find out how communities are feeling today about Ramaphosa's interventions. Nqobile, Madlala, you're on the ground. You've been speaking to people who are directly, of course, impacted by these power cuts. What is their sentiment today? Are they more optimistic? Are they more hopeful after the president announced all those measures last night?
Well, Britain, from the Soweto Electricity Crisis Committee, when we spoke to Trevor Ngwane, he was very clear that he feels that a lot of people also here feels the same, that their voices have been muted. He says those who live in poverty cannot afford things like solar power, and therefore they feel like the interventions that the president has put forward are not for the people that are poor and they don't work in favor. He said if there was a way, then what the president should be saying is that he will be installing solar power for people who are at the point who need electricity, who can't afford it, who will then be selling back that power to ESCOM. But when you say that a household should have a solar power and probably encourage them to have that, if you don't have something to eat today, where are you going to get that money? At the same time, Bradan, he was very clear in saying that they were also not consulted. He says that much of these interventions speak to obviously the higher class, because a lot of people that are on the ground that are directly affected and that have to fight with things like cable theft and so on were not in any way spoken to. And so they are watching what the president is saying, and whilst it sounds really great, but it still doesn't affect, or rather in a way appear to directly answer to these issues that they are faced on the ground. Let's listen in to Trevor Ngwane as he speaks to us.
Well, the fact that he's now talking of a crisis is good, because he's at last acknowledging that there is an electricity crisis in South Africa. But remember, our organization, the Soweto Electricity Crisis Committee, was formed in 2000, so he's waking up 22 years later. But certainly I'm concerned that the issues besetting poor working class communities, such as in Soweto, in Kukuletu, in Tanzania, Winterfeld, etc., their issues are not being addressed. There is poverty, there is unemployment. People simply cannot afford the high prices, they have to pay for electricity. So I don't think that the one time he spoke about poor communities was to talk about illegal connections. The other time he talked about households can put solar panels on top of their rooftops, But I think most people won't be able to afford, buying solar panels.
Well, that's one view from the Soweto Electricity Crisis Committee, Nqobile, but one just wonders the sentiment, of not being consulted, for example, as we are hearing from some trade unions and the communities like the Soweto one. What else are you picking up this morning?
Well, business people here, Britain, they are struggling quite heavily. I mean, we went to Soweto Hotel, where we have heard from the general manager. They're speaking to us about the issues that they're faced with. They talk about cable theft, they talk about illegal connections, and they're saying that these are things that are happening on the ground. And more than anything, they're asking that the government looks into ensuring that the officials that are trusted with curbing such things, that they do their work. And he's saying that before that the government looks out into creating more, they need to ensure that their house is in order. They're saying that issues like this shouldn't be something that they have to deal with. Some even going as far as saying that some of the entities expect them to now ensure safety and put security onto cables. And now this is a lot of money that they have to cough out to ensure that security, when they feel like the government should have been making sure that their house is in order. Another businessman also speaking to us about the fact that they've had to spend way more money looking into ensuring that their business are running, buying things like gas and fuel. So they're saying that even though the president is looking into ensuring that there's a long-term plan, they need a plan that will work effectively right now. And that plan needs to ensure that officials are held accountable for for not doing their work, and that they ensure that the officials can do their work and they do it right now, so that there is immediate answers to these businesses. But let's listen in to the general manager as she speaks to us.
it can work for those who have money, but for those people who don't have money, like your communities, it's not going to work. And also, I personally feel that it's a long-term plan. What are we doing now? The situation is now. What is government doing? What is the president saying about the now situation? Because we continue to lose business, as you have rightfully indicated. Tourist sector, tourism has opened up. We see tourists coming in by the busloads daily. But what are they coming to? South Africa, these people take a very negative report back to their various countries with that South Africa is a very, very, very poor country. And we are not a poor country. I don't believe we are. It's very sad because, the community itself around me, these people have now resorted because of their basic needs, like electricity and water and sanitation is not there. They're now resorting to doing what doesn't favor some of our businesses, which is illegal connectivity. But they need the electricity. I'm sitting here, I don't have electricity for 4 months. The government entities are just not doing their part. Now, if President says to me that he's going to whatever country to go fetch whatever and do all of that stuff, for me, he said basically nothing. He's quiet.